By the winter of 1915, the Gallipoli campaign had become a stalemate, with hopes of a rapid breakthrough vanishing. Instead, the peninsula had descended into a grinding war of trenches, snipers, disease, and exhaustion. For the men of the 10th Light Horse, the weeks after Quinn's Post brought little relief. The regiment had survived its first major fighting, but Gallipoli was beginning to wear men down in other ways. After being relieved from Quinn's Post, the 10th Light Horse was moved back into reserve positions along Walker's Ridge, closer to Anzac Cove. Here, alongside the 8th and 9th Light Horse Regiments, the 3rd Light Horse Brigade was once again assembled in full. Although further from the immediate front line, the work remained constant. Some men were assigned to digging operations, known as sapping. Even away from the forward trenches, there was really little safety. Shellfire remained constant, snipers watched the ridges, and every movement during the daylight carried risk. Trooper Sid Levesi later recalled, "We were close to the beach, and when we were off duty we used to go swimming. I can tell you it was a treat to get into the water after coming out of the dirty, lousy trenches. By this time we were all as lousy as bandicoots. We used to run a big risk while in swimming. The Turks used to snipe at us. Sometimes there would be 50 or 60 men in the water, and a Turk would let fly at them. They would come out like a mob of ducks, wait for a while, and go in again until one of the boys got hit. Then they would stay out. Every day, someone was shot while swimming." By the 18th of June, the 10th Light Horse had suffered 6 men killed in action and 58 wounded since arriving at Gallipoli. But increasingly, disease was becoming as dangerous as enemy fire. As June turned into July, diarrhea and dysentery spread rapidly through the cramped and unsanitary conditions. Then, on the 29th of July, new orders arrived. The 10th Light Horse was to move forward once again, this time to Russell's Top. They were to relieve the Wellington Mounted Rifles and take over the trenches directly opposite a narrow strip of ground known as the Neck. By the end of July, the men of the 10th Light Horse had moved into their new positions opposite the Neck. Lieutenant Colonel Brazier arrived at Gallipoli on the 30th and resumed command of the regiment. The Neck itself was little more than a narrow saddle of ground, squeezed between steep gullies on either side. To the left lay Malone's Gully, to the right the northern fork of Monash Valley. At its narrowest point, the battlefield stretched only the length of 3 tennis courts, and every yard of it was overlooked by Ottoman trenches. The ground had already seen heavy fighting earlier in the campaign. Now it would become part of a larger offensive planned for August, an attempt to finally break the stalemate at Gallipoli. On the 3rd of August, Brigade Major Antill gathered officers from the 8th, 9th and 10th Light Horse Regiments. Orders were issued for an attack on the Neck. By the 6th of August, the men were fully aware that a major assault was imminent. The attack was to take place in 4 successive waves. The first and second waves would be made by the 8th Light Horse, the third and the fourth by the 10th Light Horse. The men were told the attack would succeed through momentum and determination alone. The final lines of Brigade Major Antill's orders read, "One thing must be clearly understood and appreciated. We are out to stay. There is no coming back. The surest means are dash and determination. No time to waste on prisoners. Once out of the trenches, out for good, and the assault once all for all goes home." The Turkish trenches opposite were held by the experienced 18th Turkish Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Abdel-Kadir. Their positions overlooked the entire approach. Enemy trenches lay only 30 to 50 yards away. Throughout the evening of the 6th of August, preparations continued. At around 9 p.m., engineers crept out into no man's land to cut away sections of barbed wire in front of the Anzac trenches. The work was carried out under fire. 1 engineer was killed, several others were wounded. Before dawn on the 7th of August, Allied artillery and naval guns opened fire across the Ottoman positions. The bombardment shook the narrow ridgeline but failed to inflict the destruction hoped for by the attackers. At approximately 4:20 a.m., the Allied bombardment ceased. Silence briefly settled across the Neck. Then movement appeared in the Ottoman trenches as the defenders prepared themselves for the assault that they now knew was coming. 10 minutes later, at 4:30 a.m., the first wave of the 8th Light Horse went over the top. The response was immediate. Machine gun fire and rifle fire tore into the advancing Australians. Men were cut down almost as soon as they left the trench. Some never travelled more than a few yards. Every officer in the first wave, including its commander, Lieutenant Colonel White, was killed. Only minutes later, the second wave climbed down from the trenches and advanced into the same storm of fire. Again, the men fell in large numbers. Only 2 officers survived unhurt. Major Diebel, commanding the second wave, later wrote, "My own line came under a most deadly hail of machine gun, bomb, and rifle fire, and the men fell all around me. No man hesitated, yet I had none to carry further. I fell on my face, and taking the cover of the nearest depression in the ground, managed to get together about 8 or 10 men not yet shot. I determined to wait for the third line and sweep on with them." From the Anzac trenches, one fact had become unmistakably clear. The attack was failing. Lieutenant Colonel Brazier delayed sending forward the men of the 10th Light Horse. He now moved to brigade headquarters and argued that any further attack was futile, but Brigadier Antle ordered the assault to continue. At 4:45 a.m. the order was given for the third wave, the 10th Light Horse, to go over the top. Lieutenant Kidd, leading B Troop of B Squadron on the extreme left, later recalled, "When the order advanced third line came, with the exception of 1 troop, we leapt the parapet, and the 4 troops on the right were practically annihilated before they could advance 5 yards. I went over with my troops. It was necessary to move to the right front in order to gain the neck. The pace was slow, owing to the heaped-up dead, rubble, bush and wire. On the left flank, Major Todd had already realized the futility of continuing the advance. Using the slightly better cover available, he ordered his men to stop and entrench, rather than to continue into certain destruction. Men on the exposed right continued to fall in large numbers. Despite the catastrophe unfolding across the neck, the attack was not yet over. At approximately 5:15 a.m., the fourth wave advanced. It achieved no greater success. Again, the attackers were met by concentrated machine gun and rifle fire almost the moment they emerged from the trenches. Around 5:30 a.m., the order was finally given to withdraw. For some men trapped on the exposed right flank, retreat during daylight proved impossible. A number remained pinned down until darkness finally allowed them to crawl back to the Anzac trenches. The losses were catastrophic. The 8th Light Horse Regiment had effectively ceased to exist as a fighting unit. The Victorians suffered 12 officers and 157 other ranks killed, with a further 108 wounded. The 10th Light Horse lost 7 officers and 82 enlisted men killed, and 52 wounded. On the 26th of August, the regiment was finally relieved from the forward trenches by troops of the 20th Battalion, 5th Infantry Brigade. The surviving men of the 10th Light Horse withdrew to No. 5 section at Tabletop, arriving there at around 7 p.m. For the men, the illusions of war had long since disappeared. What remained was endurance. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content.